in a small tenement. They sat side by side on the floor creating artworks. And she stayed with him until he died, and he lived until the age of 90, which was very unusual too. And she was a brilliant artist.
Ah, well, that's the point, isn't it? So when it comes to comparing her with him, what can we say?
Her work is very different. Striking colors. She painted on silk, which is very difficult to do. Hokusai was, almost like they call him the Dickens of Japan. He did fabulous, humorous renderings of common people at work. He became a great star in the art world by a series of accidents, really. But maybe that's how anyone becomes hugely famous. Not that he doesn't deserve it, but, history definitely worked in his favor.
And are some of the works that we think of as his actually hers?
Oh, very likely, that is true. It's interesting because 10 years ago when I started to look at things, there was just a kind of low rumor mill in conferences. They can't prove it, so, art history is all about proof. But now some places say possibly by OA, so it's creeping in. Acknowledgement is definitely beginning to be made.
With some of the people we've talked about in this series, there was a very obvious, either attempt to suppress them being known to be the authors of whatever, actually, because the relatives, including the men concerned, didn't want it to be revealed. In this case, what was the motivation? What caused him to be famous and her not?
Oh, it's such a big question. Hokusai, in his lifetime, did acknowledge Owe. He's quoted as saying, she was a better painter than he was in certain ways. What strangely happened was that although she was known in her lifetime and didn't always sign, possibly because he didn't...
One of the third test against Sri Lanka, England are batting in the first innings and they are 153 for 3, while England's women are into the World T20 final after a dominant 8-wicket semi-final victory over India in Antigua. That's in the last few hours, and England will now face Australia in the final on Saturday. It is the final weekend of Rugby Union's Autumn Internationals, and we can speak to the Italy head coach. Good morning, Conor O'Shea.
Good morning, how are you?
Very well, thank you very much. Your Italy side face New Zealand tomorrow after that impressive, defeat, so impressive victory for Ireland. How much do you think that might affect them?
Come from, and in a lot of ways I applied to what we're trying to do here in Italy and put the right structures in place and give players the right environment to succeed in. And what Ireland always had ability but never had structure, and 15-20 years ago started putting the proper structures in place to allow the talent to have thrive. And a lot of what you see now is the product of a lot of work that's been done through a lot of years, and it's a source of great pride for any Irish person to look and see what they're doing. But also kind of with my own hat on here, kind of looking at it in a different way as well, and say, well, if you do the right things for good people, for talented people, then you can give them a platform to really perform in. So yeah, proud, but looking at it through I suppose a different pair of eyes.
Well, with that hat on and those eyes, Wales are bidding for an autumn test clean sweep, a 9th consecutive win. How much are all of the nations looking at getting some momentum going into a World Cup next year?
Massively, and Wales proved with being able to make the changes and put Tonga away as they did a couple of weeks that they've got that, but they'll be looking at this game and targeting the big wins. They got probably the monkey off their back in terms of beating Australia the way they did, and if they can do that to South Africa, they'll really go in with the squad depth. Hopefully he won't be too bad.
An insight into the nations. Thank you very much, Conor. Racing tips this morning: Ascot 1 o'clock, number 7, Storm home, and Ascot.
Involved in that.
Well, Fabian Picardo is on the line, who is the Chief Minister of Gibraltar. Morning to you.
Good morning.
What do you make of what we heard there from Mr. Aguirreano? How big a real stumbling block, a real issue is this?
Well, I sincerely hope that this is not going to be the final issue on the table, because we've worked very hard and have, in fact, reach agreement with Spanish colleagues in respect of Gibraltar's role in the withdrawal process. And that's been long and drawn out, but in good faith, we've worked together and we've delivered. And what I think is important that people should note is that Spain doesn't need an article in the Spain on issues. Spain is the physical and geographical gateway to Europe for Gibraltar. We recognise that, and there's absolutely no need for us to be vetoed into being brought to the table.
Yeah, and we got that impression on this programme when we came out and broadcast from Gibraltar for a day so a few months ago. There was talk about reconstruction or a building of a new airport and all sorts of things happening and all sorts of cooperative things that could still happen post-Brexit. I mean, is all that suddenly off the table, or do you think this is just a political thing that'll blow away?
Well, I certainly hope it will blow away. I don't know whether it's just a political thing, but I'm telling you, when this news broke, I was in Madrid negotiating with Marco Aguriano the last steps of the memorandums of understanding, which are referred to in the protocol of the withdrawal agreement. And that was a very positive meeting. I thought it actually augured well for the future. We were talking about starting the process of negotiating for the future. So it's genuinely, Spain should not think that we need to be dragged to the table in any particular way.
But that's why I used that word political, because with the suggestion we were hearing yesterday from our Europe editor, the suggestion actually is that there's a local election in Andalusia, and this is all about that and not about anything else.
Well, hardly local. It's quite a large region, but to be fair, I think it's important that we look at what people are saying about the deal in the United Kingdom. People are saying that the withdrawal agreement represents a failure of negotiation. Well, you've just got to look around Europe and ask the French, or indeed the Spanish, in relation to the issue of Gibraltar, and many others, how angered they are by the arrangements that are in the withdrawal of the Commons is actually a compromise arrangement where nobody wins 100%, but that's what the negotiation is about, but we gain a lot. And I think it should be seen through that prism, and Gibraltar might be helpful for people to see, that if there are Spanish issues, then the United Kingdom has not failed in its negotiation in relation to Gibraltar, and look at that in respect of all the other matters that are in the arrangement.
We were hearing earlier in the programme Dominic Raab, former Brexit Secretary, saying actually we're better off inside the EU than having this deal. What's your view of that?
Well, of course I agree with that. I mean, my view is that we should remain in the European Union, and although this is a good compromise, nothing will be as good in trade terms as being within the European Union.
Sorry to interrupt, but his point wasn't that this was a good compromise. His point that this was a bad compromise, and actually we would be better off inside the EU, and he was speaking as a leaver. Now, I just, when it comes to the various choices on offer, and let us assume for the moment that it is a choice between this deal and an uncertainty about what happens next. Would you choose the uncertainty or this deal?
Of course I wouldn't choose the uncertainty, and no responsible politician should. We are paid to bring certainty to the lives of...
A rift has opened up between the party and local business leaders. Our Ireland correspondent Chris Page has more.
Well, this is one of the places in Northern Ireland where the distance to Great Britain is shortest. Larne is on the eastern coast of County Antrim. It's from here that car ferries go to Scotland, and scores of lorries are rolling in and out of the port. This town's also a unionist stronghold. In the last general election, the DUP won 57% of the vote in this constituency, and plenty of people are right behind the party and their objections to the Prime Minister's Brexit deal.
Very bad deal.
Sold out.
Sold out?
Yep.
Theresa May has sold it out.
That's
After all her promises and all.
You agree?
Oh, yes, definitely agree. It's the worst ever. She said never would a British Prime Minister sell us out, but she done it.
So the DUP correctly oppose it then?
Definitely.
Oh, yes.
Definitely.
DUP's right.
So the only ones us done it up.
I would support DUP. I mean, once you see big business getting behind a deal, it's not going to work for the common man.
Business leaders in Northern Ireland have indeed got behind the deal, so much so that they were thanked in person by Theresa May at a reception in Downing Street yesterday evening.
She's clearly a woman with a plan, and she's got a lot of tenacity, and Northern Ireland's clearly important for her.
One of those invited to number 10 was Claire Guinness, the chief executive of another port, Warren Point Harbour in County Down. She's part of a coalition of business people who are backing the Prime Minister.
She underlined the importance of the unfettered access to the GB economy and the importance of the trading relationship that we have with the Republic of Ireland. And those two things are critical to Northern Ireland's prosperity. What we've seen is the business organisations have all come together, the CBI, the IOD, Ulster Farmers Union, and I love to see that collaboration. I think that's very powerful, and I think that sends a very strong message of support from Northern Ireland's business.
The industry groups have been careful to put their emphasis on supporting the government rather than criticising the DUP. But nonetheless, for them to be so at odds with the Democratic Unionists over such a big issue is very unusual, perhaps unprecedented. So how difficult is this for the DUP, who've liked to style themselves as the party of business? According to their leader Arlene Foster, they're not feeling uncomfortable.
There are many in the business community who are not in favour of this deal. I've met a gentleman who runs a
place where the DUP are politically supreme.
Why should the EDC have control? No, I think it's a bad deal, and I think Theresa May is just trying to salvage something.
I think it could place the people of Northern Ireland in a straitjacket. They would be dictated to from Europe. The Queen was crowned as the Queen of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, and we want to hold that.
Chris Page reporting, and we'll be in Belfast next Thursday. The time now 17 minutes to 9. Crossrail, that huge engineering project, the underground railway going right across London, is in difficulty. Number one, it's not opening next to take pressure off the tube.
As you expect, it is very expensive. The budget was just under £15 billion. It was increased by £500 million in July to £15.4 billion. The Mayor of London City Council has warned that it might need more money. It's also late, at least 9 months late. It was going to open next month, now not till autumn 2019, whatever that means. The company has said it needs more time to test the trains and to fit out the stations. The National Law Office says the investigation will look at the causes of the cost increase and also the governance and oversight of the project.
Thanks, Dominic. 16 minutes to 9. A helmet worn by an Anglo-Saxon king 1300 years ago will go on display today, a part of what's called the Staffordshire Hoard. It's been painstakingly reconstructed in the 9 years since the
process. It was a deliberate act.
And how on earth do you go about the process then? A, of knowing that it's a helmet that you're looking at, and B, of putting 1,000 pieces in together into something that looks like a helmet.
It's a huge number of expert hours, basically. There are a couple of large pieces. We've got 2 cheek pieces and a crest from on top of the helmet.
That's the bit that gives away that it is a helmet, is it?
Yeah, exactly. That's the clue. But then the decoration on the helmet is composed of very fine stamped gilded silver panels of sort of foil, really, and that took a team of quite a number of people, many months of research. It's like a very complex jigsaw done under the microscope, basically.
Now, many people may have seen the famous Sutton Hoo helmet from Suffolk, held I think in the British Museum now, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely.
Is it similar? Is it related to that?
It's definitely related. Those stamped foil panels share a lot of similarities. You might say it's a very similar date. It comes from the same sort of family of headwear, I think you'd say. Probably the most striking difference is that our helmet is made of gilded silver, so it looks gold, whereas the Sutton Hoo example, the panels are tinned bronze, so it looks silver.
Lovely. Well, we can all see it now, so Jenny Butterworth, thank you.
For Australia to come back! England have just won the World Cup!
But this, he feared, might have gone horribly wrong. Was that really Johnny Wilkinson?
My position was like an eagle in its eyrie, right at the back of the stand, and he was the size of a dot. I was going full pelt until he put it onto his right leg, and I had never seen him ever drop a right-footed drop goal. And I lurched forward, grabbed my binoculars, rammed them into my head, and thank goodness it was Johnny doing his only ever right-footed drop goal.
Well, Robbo, as he's known throughout the game, could play a bit too. 8 caps for Scotland in the late 1960s, and then an unusual story of career development.
I've just been so fortunate when I was captaining Scotland in the final trial, and the following week would presumably have captained Scotland against France. In fact, I never played again. I did the cruciates in one knee, and I did the medial in the other knee, and I was never able to play rugby properly again. things happen for a reason, and I was just very, very fortunate that at that time Bill McLaren was doing commentary on television, Cliff Morgan did it on radio, and Cliff phoned and said, I've met this guy Robertson, he talks non-stop, he could be a commentator, what do you think, Bill? And Bill said, oh, I for Sony, and he's not all that bad, give him a chance. And that was fate coming in.
Wigglesworth gets the ball, puts up a huge towering kick. It's not gone. It's a chance. The score is given. Right down.
3 questions, quick fire answers. The best player you ever saw?
Gareth Edwards.
The best team you ever saw?
1974 Lions in South Africa.
And the best match?
One would be the 1995 World Cup final, Nelson Mandela handing the cup to Francois Pienaar, and the 2003 World Cup final, England winning.
47 years as a commentator. My, he's seen some changes.
It is a different game, and people are bigger and stronger and faster. The really good teams still play great rugby. Before, we had much more fun with the players, and it was the amateur game, and we'd all go out, the media and the players together. Now there's a definite divide at the highest professional level, but the rugby has taken a huge step forward. It's a great global sport. No, I wouldn't change anything.
So what does the man who taught a Prime Minister, Tony Blair, and rubbed shoulders with Hollywood royalty, Richard Burton and Elizabeth Taylor, expect to do next?
Now it's not quite the right time of year, but it's to get the golf clubs out and chase that little white ball into that tiny little hole on as many good but different golf courses until eventually I fall over.
The magnificent, the incomparable.